Good evening and welcome to the Sheetalnath Conversations 56th Sunday evening 7 p.m. IST show. I am back here with yet another wonderful, distinguished guest on yet another wonderful, insightful subject on yet another historic show of Sheetalnath Conversations. These alluring notes which emanate from the gigantic conversational grid, our gigantic conversational grid, enveloping and enveloping and echoing the time spaces, the bygone time spaces of this vast nooks and corners, cliffs and gorges, troughs and crusts, lands and seas, across this wonderful, gigantic, geography, geographical contours, where our civilization has flown through the centuries, illustriously, grandiosely. Not only centuries, if we go back to the history of Yashomati, the coronation of first princess, the world's first empress, so it goes around 5,000. There's a difference of 5,000 years ago. So I think in those times, probably in the, it was since those times it is known as the glittering crystal crown of India. Kashmir has always been known like that. It has been a very inspiring seat of learning, seat of music, seat of knowledge, seat of wisdom, seat of science, ancient sciences. And in a way, it was a Silicon Valley in those times where people from all over India and abroad used to come, meditate, create something good for the humanity, and then propagate it into the entire India and to the rest of the world. Students from all over the globe, especially the Asian students, used to come. Southeastern Asian, Central Asian students used to come from China, Mongolia, Far East to study here. So this was a seat of learning, a great seat of learning, a Silicon Valley of our ancient times, we may call it. So we have been reasonably enough able to march towards this podium, which is designed for this noble concept, and which certainly is, gives a very, very wide dimensions and wide attention to the things which are not seen and which have been observed and which are retold by these great personalities who visit our shows. Uh, I am feeling a very overwhelming response from the diaspora across the globe, from the magnanimous seekers and other people across the globe for this wonderful program, for its entirely a very different class and format, and for its eloquence, for its informally formal structure. So thank you once again for gluing into this wonderful program. I think this could have not been possible because you are all the inseparable ingredients of this wonderful show. Uh, Coming back to the main topic today, I think we all know Kashmir since ancient times. There were many Kashmirs away from Kashmir. People from across the globe used to come down to Kashmir, across the India, from South India used to come down to Kashmir, learn here, and go back, and vice versa. People from Kashmir used to go to the other places, and this migration was going on and on since millennia. But in the most recent times, about 500, 600 years, this was for some, not so good reasons, because the cruelty and barbarianism, the persecution of some monarchs from the outside who raided and invaded Kashmir, especially the Afghans, Afghan period of Afghans and period of Sikandar Butshikan as well, and later the some period of this Mughals as well. The Kashmiris have felt very suffocated. They were tormented. They were persecuted, and many of the Kashmiris left the state in the search of survival, belligerent, facing the belligerent climate, belligerent situations, especially in the first phase of the 18th century, and traveled across the plains of the northern India, and by dint of their hard work, by the dint of their character, by dint of their morality, by dint of their genetic inheritance and intelligence and brilliance, they rose to the powers of eminence in many kingdoms, in many princely states, where they became the courtiers, the prime ministers, the governors, the advisors, and they also became the poets, and many they contributed many other aspects of the society. Be it the Lucknow, Allahabad, Jaipur, Lahore, uh, Calcutta, Meerut, you can feel in these centuries there is a hustle and bustle of Kashmiris is very distantly heard, and they are identified in these cities. And so to say, there are certain mahallas, certain streets named as Kashmiri mahallas. So, I mean, that's very unique. One remarkable thing about this community is that although they have migrated since 2 centuries or 3 centuries, some people also migrated in 1947, and latest migration was on the 1990. All these things basically they have maintained their identity, their link with the tradition is very live, very agile. So that is something very remarkable, very unparalleled in the human history. So today we are going to talk about, we are going to crisscross, explore this whole migration from 18th century and their dealing with the rough climates and reaching and rising to the positions of eminence, living traditions. They're all shades of their lives we'll be talking about, and certainly this is going to be a very interesting session. And today we have with us a very eminent personality, a dynamic leader of the corporate world in the hoteliering industry, former CEO of ITC hotels, and former president of Assocham and CII, one of the most dynamic leader whom the industry peers look as for the inspiration for his very innovative, pioneering models of a sustainable development along with the business, where especially the environment is taken care of, where the local population's culture is being taken care of, where the ecological the threats, challenges which the particular trade creates, that is to be taken care of. He's a very wonderful personality, a multifaceted personality. Who doesn't know Deepak Haksar Saab, the CEO, ex-CEO of ITC Limited, and he is very deeply rooted with his traditions. He has a true Kashmiri identity, and he says that it is the Vedas, his connection with the Vedas, that has shaped and evolved his personal as well as professional life. So this is a great occasion, an occasion to rejoice that we have a such personality, great personality, our great son of the India, our native Kashmiri Pandit, who has risen to very powerful position of eminence and who has given something to the society, something to the India, something to the country back. We want to certainly listen to his respect, with great respect and great reverence and great affection. Let us welcome Sri Deepak Haksar ji, the multifaceted personality, the great corporate leader, into our Sheetalnath Conversation show. Deepak ji, you're welcome to the 56th Sheetalnath Conversation show.
Thank you. Thank you, Khalsa. Very kind of you to invite me, first of all. And I must say that I feel I was very reticent in coming today. If it had not been for your persuasive skills to get me here and speak to this wonderful platform that you have created. Uh, and uh, and the reason I was very reticent was because I felt that I was not the most qualified person to speak about my ancestors. And I also felt that there are many other people who have a greater sense of history and have a better appreciation, who would be able to do justice to the subject. But I'm here, and I hope that uh, I will be able to give a mosaic of the Kashmiri Pandits who came and settled in the plains of North India and contributed immensely to society, to nation building, and fiercely protective of the identity. Fiercely protective of the identity. They
Thank you, sir.
rose to positions of eminence and were leaders of great merit. And you have alluded to some of that yourself, and you said about these great people.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. I think it's a pleasure. We are going to today's format is going to be slightly different. I don't think my intervention and conversation is needed in the first segment, the major segment of the program. We'll see at the end if there is a possibility of interaction. We will interact. So I'll be invisible for some time, and let Deepak ji and the audience have a direct interface with each other. It will be a great delight and honor and a very very rare occasion to listen to such great luminary. Sir, kindly elucidate this
Yeah,
wonderful,
thank you.
unfold
So,
this wonderful stories.
so I
We are
think
all waiting for so eagerly. Thank
so.
you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Kalsa. Uh, uh, my story really starts by sharing the movement of Kashmiri Pandits in the early 18th century when they came down to the plains. And I will attempt to give a little mosaic of the environment, the surrounding, and the people they were by anecdotally what I've
Yes.
heard, what I have read, and also some excerpts about my own ancestors that perhaps will give you some idea about uh, how things were at that point of time and how they sort of uh, responded to the challenges of their time. Uh, Kaul has been very kind to introduce me, and I must add over here that my achievements pale in comparison to our ancestors because they were giant of people, intellectually brilliant, and were able to carve themselves in history by sheer dint of hard work, integrity, intellect, and trust. They were apolitical. Their jobs were to manage, to administrate, to guide people, to advise people. And that's where they excelled. They were great advisors, great administrators, and they were in demand in every princely state, literally. Uh, so, 18th century, the Afghan rule and the persecution of the Afghan rule, and followed by the Sikh rule, 1819, which went in, which also did not equate themselves in glory. I must. There were high taxations. There were social tensions. Uh, Opportunities were less. The pundits were really the middle class, educated middle class of that point of time. The elites were the Muslims, and so obviously the environment was such. The pundits both to escape religious persecution, to uh, escape from the social tensions, as well as to look for better opportunities and greener pastures, left Kashmir. So there is a folklore that, uh, and this is what I've heard, but I've not been able to validate this, that there were 9 families in sometime in 18th century that left uh, Kashmir and came down to the plains, and we are the offsprings of these 9 families. Now, it seems very romantic and interesting. It's almost like the lost Jewish tribe when they came in and settled in parts of Northeast, etc. Uh, but when these people came in, and as Mr. Kaul alluded to, one I would imagine that some families came in, made their base, wrote back, got other family members, And that's how the numbers kept on increasing. And every place where they settled down and they got into position of eminence, they invited more people, and that's how they all spread. So basically, the center of where the influx was obviously Delhi. It was in Lucknow. It was in Allahabad. Agra also, I know there is, and Lahore. And certainly there would be in other parts of the country. Calcutta could be one of them. But these were really the 4 or 5 centers: Lahore, Delhi, Jaipur, Jodhpur, Agra, Kanpur, Faizabad. That became really the places where these people went. Uh, and I think they tried their best to uh, uh, retain their identity by by ensuring that they lived in mohallas. They felt safe, they felt secure. So you had in Sitaram Bazar, where my ancestors came in, uh, you had a large number of Kashmiri Pandits. In Lucknow, you had this huge Kashmiri mohalla that came into existence between 1775 and 1780, when Nawab Asif-ud-Daula shifted his seat of government from Faizabad to Lucknow. And the generosity of Nawab Asif-ud-Daula and affluence during his rule attracted the Kashmiri Pandits from different parts of the country, even from Kashmir itself, to come to Lucknow and then settle down in Kashmiri Mohalla for better prospects. It's known we had beautiful Havelis in Kashmiri Mohalla. You had almost 500 to 1,000 Pandit families living at one time, due to which it became a very strong nerve center for social, cultural, education, and political activities of the Kashmiri Pandit migrants. And what I could gather is that they maintained a very strict discipline by living within themselves, by ensuring all their rituals, their food, their prayers, and also the marriage. Very, very clear that marrying outside the community was absolutely a sacrilege. Gair Baradri, as they said, was an unacceptable part. They wanted to maintain their exclusivity. And Kashmiri Mohalla used to have a good number of Kashmiri gurus who used to perform all religious ceremonies as per the Kashmiri traditions. Kashmiri Panchang was taken out. Navre was celebrated with great festive gusto. Herat was celebrated with great gusto. Pan was celebrated with great gusto. My mami, who is from the Sharga family, and Shargas had the most eminent Haveli, and we'll talk about it. They had the most beautiful Havelis, and they all ensured that they were shadi khanas, they were community areas where people could come in and do the marriage. So everything was done to ensure that the Pandits remained together and followed their traditions, even though they were hundreds of miles away from Kashmir. We came in 1804, and I will talk about it as we move on. What happened was that one of the fallouts of this, I think maybe by the second generation or the third generation, but sometimes I felt around the language disappeared. We lost the language, which I think with great regret. And when I think back and I wonder as to why if we had Kashmiri gurus who were there, and we were following all other traditions and religious ceremonies, why we could not have got a tutor to continue with our language. But it's easier said than done. The court language was Urdu, Persian, Farsi, English, and most of the Kashmiri Pandits learned, were fluent in English, fluent in Urdu. I know they knew, some knew Farsi, some knew Persian. So I would imagine that they were multilingual because they had to meet the challenges of societies, learn the local languages, and I think it became difficult, therefore, for them to continue to keep with uh, their own language, and and I think that was perhaps a sad thing. But so be it, and that's what happened. But when it comes to food, uh, uh, food was a really a unifier. And I remember, you know, uh, in 2000 when I was heading a hotel in Mumbai, ITC Maratha, and we used to do food festivals, etc. So they said, sir, we must do a Kashmiri food festival. And obviously, the food and beverage manager came to my office, said, let's do it. So I said, okay, so let's organize it. And he was planning to get a vaza, and he said gushtaba and rishta and a whole lot of other things. So I said, bhaiya, ye to pandit ka to cuisine hai nahi ye. So he said, so that they were quite shocked because I don't think pandit cuisine had really been showcased uh, in public. It was not something. Kashmiri cuisine that people knew was the cuisine of the Wazas, the Muslims. Siddharth Kak was a very dear friend. Ashok Pandit was also a very dear friend. Uh, Siddharth, who was the filmmaker,
Yeah.
Bua was a very good cook. And I said, Siddharth, we must do this Kashmiri Pandit cuisine festival called the Festival of Posh. And I remember that when we were late in the evenings working out the menus, to my surprise, I felt very good when I could talk to his bua and hold myself in terms of the flavors, in terms of the food. And I felt that even after 300 years, the food remained intact, the foundation remained intact, even though there was certainly influence of Lucknow and Awadh and Delhi. And right throughout, when people come home, you talk about dam aloo, and dam aloo becomes a piece of great interest. Where the size of the aloo, were they fried well, were the masalas good, how was the food? The chaman became methi chaman, I think, instead of rungwan, instead of the tomato chaman, which is there. Uh, Similarly, chokwangan, which is the khatte baigan. We also have khatte baigan. We have khatte baigan. So we have a whole range of khatte sabziyan, and that was made possible because you had much more vegetables in the plains. So you had Rogan Josh, what you call as must, we call became as kofta. The koftas, I realized that what over a period of time had evolved, it was slightly more sleeker, slightly more rounder as against what the must was, but the flavors were almost intact. Uh, we call uh, the var as badiya, which is part of the marriage rituals, both vegetarian badiyas and non-vegetarian badiyas. So it was a very fascinating thing as to how khatti sabzi, dam aloo, rogan josh, kofte, kalia, yakhni, kabarga. And kabarga, what we did, and I realized it evolved, was that it had a slight basin, very thin layer of basin. It used to be fried. So there was slight difference, but but it was still a very, it was called kabarga, and it had almost a similar texture. You could still chew into it and bite the whole thing out. So there were subtle differences. Kashmiri Pandits brought Shabdik into Awadh. And I think the food was a great unifier. And marriage, you can't marry outside, was completely no. So a lot of strict traditions were brought in. Women were not in parda, but they were not somebody who used to go out and talk and chat. They were all happy in the Kashmiri mohalla, meeting with everybody, खाना खा रहे हैं, मिल रहे हैं, अपनी शादियां हो रही हैं. In marriages, nobody used to come from outside. It was all the Kashmiri community. So, the Kashmiri men, instead of wearing traditional ferin, the Kashmiri Pandit men started wearing achkan, churidar pajama, and a black pump shoe with a cap on their head. The Kashmiri Pandit ladies started wearing saris, but in a different style than what the local women used to do to keep their distinct identity intact. And they used to didn't wear parda, but they used to cover a chadar, and winter make a shawl, just cover themselves up. And so that's how. So, and they used to study later on. They had a school in the Kashmiri mohallas where the women would study rather than going out. So there was a lot of care taken. And one of the things I think what stood out was the children must study. When La Martiniere School was established in 1845, the Kashmiri Pandit boys felt the importance of European education for better future prospects. And they went in to this very good school. Bishan Narayan Dar was the first Kashmiri Pandit of Kashmiri Mohalla, went to England in 1884, breaking caste barriers. It's an interesting story that Bishan Narayan Dar, an eminent person, when he returned from England to Kashmir Mohalla around 1888, he started giving fiery speeches, took a plunge in the freedom movement. So a lot of Kashmiris got into freedom movement also and became very close to national leaders of the time. Subsequently, Bishan Narayan Dar became the president of Indian National Congress in 1911 in its 27th plenary session held in Calcutta. But Bishan Narayan Dar was excommunicated from the Kashmiri Baradri. And he had to undergo tremendous hardship because they just would not want him to go to London. Going abroad was for the Orthodox Kashmiri Pandits was moving out of their community. This is almost like the Mormons or Quaker. You stay within the commune. You can't go out. And when he came back after his studies, and there was a huge discord. And the story goes that two distinct groups came, the Bishan Dharam group and the Bishan group. The Dharam groups were orthodox, and they were absolutely anti-youth, becoming westernized, having global outlook at that point of time, or going abroad. And the Bishan group, who wanted the Kashmiri youths to break out of the mold and to become more westernized and perhaps even go abroad, etc. And this discord reverberated across the country. It went right up to Lahore, where we had great Kashmiri Pandits, Raja Dayanath Kaul, very affluent, extremely rich, and his progeny is today Justice Sanjay Kaul, who is in the Supreme Court, an absolutely brilliant mind. Look at his judgments that he gives. He's the son of Manmohan Krishnan and Raja Upendra, grandfather Raja Upendra Narayan Kaul, Raja Gyannath, Madan, Somnath, Raja Dinanath. And I will share about Raja Dinanath. He went to the court of Ranjit Singh. He was because the finance minister. So So this is interesting as to how orthodoxy and the at one end, women can't go out, women have to be together, communes have to be together. No marriage right up till 20th century, 21st century, practically. I mean, even though I wasn't told about it, and even though I came in a family with much more secular, global outlook, I think it was unwritten that I would marry a Kashmiri. You did not have to say. Suraj Narayan Bahadur was a sub-judge, felt the importance of girl education. In 1904, he started a girls' school as residents in Kashmiri Mohalla exclusively for Kashmiri Pandit girls. He employed European lady teachers to teach these girls. Now this school has become a full-fledged intermediate college and imparts education to about 2,000 girls belonging to the communities. Brij Narayan Chakbas in the beginning of 20th century established a library and formed Kashmiri Young Men Association to guide Kashmiri Pandit youth and to channelize their energies in a constructive manner in order to reform the community. And there were newsletters. We were very mindful that the Kashmiri youth must not imitate the decadence of the Lucknow court. You can't go to kothas, you can't go to mushairas, can't drink. Lot of things were said. You people, you cannot do these things. And they were seniors, they were elders, there were newsletters, all to make sure that the young Kashmiri boys educated with sound moral values so they can rise and make their mark in society. You had people like Sir Tej Bahadur Satru, Sir Tej Bahadur Satru, uh, and Mr. Kaju, great luminaries and lawyers who took uh, made efforts to remove some of the aspects that we felt were bringing us back, but at the same time ensure that the thinking was noble. So these great uh, leaders or mentors became good mentors to the youth, the Kashmiri Pandit youth. Then there you had a person called Motilal Nehru, who used to also come regularly debate over community affairs. And Motilal Nehru, as you know, was a completely, at one time, very British and Western oriented, but the freedom struggle did bring about some kind of a change in him. And it was, he realized that it was important to keep the community together with certain values that would help the community retain its identity. You had Brij Krishan Gurtu, who was an advocate for profession and staunch follower, and did a lot of work to simplify the marriage ceremonies and other rituals by curtailing vulgar display of wealth. So these are also some of the reforms that were happening that were also important. No dowries, which was absolutely no. Jagat Narayan Malla did a lot of work to make uh, diasporan refined so they may be able to perform the social obligations commitment better way and broader outlook. His towering personality was a source of inspiration for many. Prithvinath Chauk brought education reforms and founded BPN College in Kanpur. And then the Kashmiri ladies also uh, came to the forefront in part of the freedom struggle also. That strong women, very much rooted to the soil, not as weak people, strong, uh, uh, with while they had a certain outlook to life, uh, very ingrained in their own traditions. So very local and very global. So you had Mrs. Nehru, Uma Nehru, Rameshwari Nehru, Ladli Prasad Kichlu, T.N. Raina launched a movement to bring about reforms in the Kabansam marriage ceremonies and other rituals by cutting short expenditure. And a whole lot of things were done at that point of time. Widows, we had a temple in Mathura where Kashmiri widows were looked after. They were given a place of dignity and respect. Uh, Then you had Prannath Pandit, who did his MA from Sanskrit College, Calcutta, and he wrote a number of books on Hindu law, performed marriage of a widow himself, acting as a Purohit, as he had command over Sanskrit language, and also had a deep knowledge of performing religious ceremonies. There's a road in Calcutta after known as Prannath, and one of my uh, family members, my uh, uh, grandfather's, my father's brother, the last brother, was given as god, and that was also very common. Adoptions were very common. You found innumerable cases of child being given to a Kashmiri family who did not have any children or did not have a son, uh, and that was a common practice that was also done. Uh, KPs were never threat to any vested group, and in the Mughal court, and because of that, they went on to become an integral part of the empire and excelled in various fields. And subsequently, with the ebbing of the Mughal power and the rise of the East India, Kashmiri Pandits started moving to other places. And my ancestor, Sarup Narayan, the Dewan of Bundelkhand, was in Indore, settled in Indore. Shiv Prasad Kak and his brothers in Bharatpur, Vishwanath Babu and Haksar in Gwalior. There was another family, our ancestors who were in Gwalior family. They became a bridge between the rulers and the British political agents. And few pictures of these personalities along with the family give a distinctive feel at the time. Regal, absolutely stand out in the crowd. Sir Kailash Narayan Haksar, uh, one of my ancestors who went and settled, whose family settled in Gwalior, was very close to His Highness. He was a political agent. He did a great work. He was the Prime Minister of Bikaner State. In the 1930s, he went to Kashmir, which was under Dogra rule at that point of time. In 1930, there was a lot of communal, I don't know if there was a communal riot, but there was a lot of problems that took place over there. And it is told that a lot of that was induced from people from outside. Some said that there were Muslims from Aligarh who went over there, created these communal tensions, social tensions, etc. The British Viceroy was extremely unhappy with the turn of events that took place, and the Dogra Maharaja did not take the necessary steps to control. And Sir Kailash Narayan Haksar went over there to speak on behalf of the Dogra Maharaja with the Viceroy to resolve these issues. So they really became intermediaries between the Riyasats and the political agent. With the ebbing of the Mughal and the waning of the Mughal Empire, these European looking, if I may add, tall, handsome, fair, fluent in Urdu, Persian, and English, were able to play a decisive role between the British masters and this thing. And this happened right through this period till they got into the freedom movement. And that also sort of saw a rise of a new breed of Kashmiri Pandits who took to Khadi, who took to civil disobedience, etc. Uh, and when the British raised the qualifications as one of the benchmark for getting people into it, it was Kashmiri Pandits then who went out and got higher education. And they became very good lawyers because they were very good in articulation, logic, arguments. A notable few whose photographs, if you look at those photographs, you see them how they are dressed and how they give an idea of the aristocracy of these people. Was Shambhunath Pandit, who became the first Indian judge of the Calcutta High Court in 1861. Ram Narayan Dhar, the first Indian judge of the Chief Court of Lahore. Gangaram Kola, whose great-grandson, or maybe great-great-grandson, was a close friend of mine. We studied in the same school in Sindhia, Gwalior. Just passed away at the age of 60, unfortunately. and some like Sir Kailash Haksar and Sukhdev Prasad Kar. They all were, right there holding very important posts. The community played an important role in the freedom struggle. Ajyodarnath Kunjru started a national paper in the Indian Herald in 1879. Prominent lawyer Sir Tej Bahadur Sapru called for constitutional reforms. Some contributed to the debate of Swaraj and self-rule. Sir Kailash Narayan Haksar was the political representative of His Highness the late Madhav Rao Scindia of Gwalior, his great-grandfather. And he was the state's representative at a first roundtable conference in London in 3031. So I'm just trying to sort of say that this was the landscape of how the Kashmiri Pandits lived, contributed. I have something that I just culled out, and I just thought I must read this because it will give you again an interesting thing of how they worked very hard to keep everything, the flock together, in spite of the tension of the Dharam group and the Bishan group, the orthodox side and the not so orthodox side. There was this constant tussle that happened till right up to independence. Baijnath Sharga built a historic Haveli in 1883. It's called the Sharga Ki Haveli. He brought skilled craftsmen and masons from Jaipur to build the Haveli. Its foundations were laid elephantine deep to make the whole structure solid and strong. The walls were 3 to 4 feet in width, which were built by highly baked thin bricks, popularly known as Lakhori eat with urad ki dal and gur as a binding material. This is the old way of, using the plaster. The Haveli was divided into 2 sections, one for women, Zanana Khana, and the other for man and visitor known as Mardana. The Haveli had an inbuilt square open space with angan for women to perform their daily household affairs. There was a special place in the Haveli known as Dukhati for keeping big vessels and utensils with family name engraved on them, meant for cooking food for community get-togethers. They were given to community members on occasion of marriage ceremonies, which were duly returned when such ceremonies were over. And so this is how people were supported. Panda from Kailash, one Panda from Kailashnath from Mutton in Kashmir used to come in every winter session, the young son wearing firan, white turban on his head with a big tilak mark, keeping big Bahis to note down the new arrivals and death in the family to keep the records. I remember every time when we had gone to Kashmir, going to Mutton was an absolute integral part. Going and looking at our shajara, the family tree, and writing that this person has passed away and I have come here. And mirroring this entire record in Mutton in Hardwar was an absolute ritual of every Kashmiri Pandit. The family tree, family record must be maintained. And that was, I think, also brought in a sense of that, I have to do this. The elder son must do this work. Sheermal prepared by and Nimish used to be most favorite breakfast in winters. The Haveli was the epicenter of cultural, social, and political activities of eminent Kashmiri Pandits during the later part of 19th and early 20th century. So I'm just sort of recreating that all throughout the 18th century and the 19th century, and there were difficult moments. People moved from one state to another, went through the freedom struggle. At every task that was given to them, these ancestors of ours did a remarkable job. And I think what stood out was their integrity. Men of high integrity, high intellect, and completely apolitical. Jugal Saab, I just want to know if I can, if there is time, then I can say something about my family
Yes, yes, sir. Please,
with your
please go ahead.
permission,
Please,
if it is
please go
clear.
ahead. I mean, you have to speak continuous and extempore. This format is like
Yeah.
that. I
Yes.
otherwise I had to ask this question. It is necessary that you talk about your family. I think you said that they were divan from Bundelkhand. Just now you said something about it. I don't know,
So,
but
yeah,
your family and your childhood and your
yeah.
upbringing, that would be very
So,
nice if you
so
share.
I think the purpose why I'm sharing something about my ancestor, because there were many Kashmiri Pandits, and you can have session on each one of them, and
Atals from
because they were
Jaipur.
all
Atal, family Atal.
Atals of Jaipur. My sisters was married to the Atal family, the hereditary Diwans of Jaipur state. There are a whole lot of them. I mean, there's not one, so many of them. But I think what will happen is when you hear what I'm going to share, you will get
Yes.
some idea of how we think, how we behave, uh, and there's a lot of commonality, and they're all related. Sab shadiyan ho rahi thi wahi.
Okay.
My grandmother was perhaps the last who was brought from the valley or was born in the valley.
Okay.
After that, there were enough of the Kashmiri girls in the plain that we had to marry within, that we
Within
stopped,
this.
we didn't get any girls from the valley. And perhaps now is the time to infuse this blood, because I think there was a lot of uh, I wouldn't say crossbreeding, but when I was getting married, my wife is from the Shipuri family
Are,
from Allahabad,
Allahabad.
and uh, her grandmother and uh, my another elderly aunt were chatting together. And in the course of the conversation, they brought out कि we are fourth cousins.
Okay.
कि ये रिश्तेदारियां थी, हम fourth cousins हैं. And suddenly my father-in-law tapped my mother-in-law's, my wife's grandmother and said कि Mama, अब छोड़ दीजिए, don't bring the relationship closer. So I mean, the joke is that everybody was married. You meet, the first thing we do when we meet a Kashmiri family, and say, अरे भाई किसके बच्चे हो, तुम कहाँ हो, अरे अच्छा ओ तुम उसके हो, अच्छा, and you find you are able to take out relationships and all. It's great pastime, and it a sense of a great feeling that we are all interconnected and we are all together. I just want to now start with reading that about my uncle wrote a memoir, and his first book was on the story of my childhood and boyhood. And
You're talking
he,
about P.N. Haksar, the great,
gee,
great strategist and diplomat and ambassador. Yeah,
yeah,
your uncle.
gee, yeah. I just thought that, and he sort of, and I'll read because it's very interesting. But he said the impression I formed was that though we might not be particularly wealthy, we were Khandani, proud of our lineage. On my mother's side, we were direct descendants of Raja Dinanath, and on my father's of Sarup Narayan Haksar. As I grew older and heard repeated references to my forefathers, I attempted to discover more about them. I also wanted to belong, to know my origins, to be able to say something about my heritage. I wanted to be part of something and thus delved into the history of our family. Uh, if you Raja Dinanath, there is a book entitled Chiefs and Family of Note in Punjab, and published in 1914, prepared by Sir Griffin, Colonel Charles Massey. And they give a rather dramatic description of uh, Raja Dinanath, who was my grandmother's great grandfather. And Raja Dinanath Madan was one of the first Kashmiri Pandits who was knighted in the court of Ranjit Singh and became an indispensable part of the Sikh Darbar. And it was his time that a lot of people, Kashmiri Pandits, came to Punjab. So Punjab also had a sizable Kashmiri uh, uh, community. And when we talk about Punjab, we talk about Lahore also, because Lahore was part of Punjab. Among the men who rose to power during the latter days of Sikh Empire, the most remarkable Raja Dinanath. He has been well and happily styled the Talleyrand of the Punjab, and his life and character bear a strong resemblance to those of the European statesmen. Revolutions in which his friend and patrons perished passed him by, dynasties rose and fell, but never involved him in their ruin. In the midst of bloodshed and assassination and judicial robbery, which were the rule of the state, his wealth and power continually increased. His sagacity and farsightedness was such that when to the other eyes the political sky was clear, he could perceive the signs of a coming storm. It goes on to say that he was a man who possessed immense local knowledge, has a vast capacity for work. They also talked about that as a financier, the Polish Raja was intelligent and liberal, and he readily appreciated the advantage of the new system taxation introduced by the English. There is Raja Dinanath signed the Treaty of March in 1846, which ceded the best parts of Punjab to English. So there is obviously aspect that people felt that he shouldn't have done, or perhaps, but I don't think he had an option. He did whatever he could to save the empire from the encroachment of the British. And it really gives all the account of how he managed and how he held and how he was used by Ranjit Singh and to help him out in so many areas and so many problems that took place that time. I won't go into that detail, but I think he was not an ordinary person. He played the game of life according to laws governing the survival of the fittest. I think this stands for everybody. The Kashmiri Pandits who settled and took these positions, they were survivors also. They knew how to handle and manage. And in doing so, they kept the community together and the community safe. That was the burden that they carried, and they carried it gladly and responsibly. His son was Diwan Bahadur Ramnath. There were two sons he had. My grandmother was from the other son, Diwan Mannath, and Diwan Mannath passed away very early. Diwan Bahadur Ramnath looked after my grandmother and her brother, Gyannath, and one sister. And Gyannath embodied the spirit of Dinanath mother. My grandmother was of the Madan family. He was unrelenting in his resolve to get on. He took to English ways in food and dress. This is 1913 or sometime 1914. He saw the World War I the chance for personal advancement. With zeal, he devoted his time and energy recruiting the Punjab peasantry into the British Indian Army. For his exceptional and distinguished service, he received the Sword of Honor, the title of Raja Sahib, and 4 rectangles of land in the Montgomery district, Punjab. In 22, he is admitted to the Foreign and Political Department of the Government of India. In 25, he was awarded the title of Rai Bahadur, and 34 honored with the companionship of the Indian Empire. A year later, he received the Silver Jubilee Medal. When the affairs of some princely domain fell into disarray, Gyannath was sent to straighten things out. Thus, he became the president of the Council Regency of Nabha state. By that, he was also the prime minister of Jaipur state and later of Indore. By the time he reached the end of his career, he attained what he most wanted, the hereditary title of Raja, which was considered, it was considered, for him, it was like the ultimate pinnacle of what he had aspired for. Thus, the great grandson of Raja Deennath himself became a Raja. And he was a remarkable man, handsome, very much knew how to handle things. And he was, later years, he settled in Shimla. He died at a ripe old age of 93, 94. And he owned a lot of property in Shimla, including Ritz Cinema. And he kept all his family together, looked after them, like a patriarch, strong patriarch, dominating patriarch. His weakness was his sister, my grandmother. And my grandmother used to grumble. Every year, the beginning of summer, a paigam used to come to invite her to Shimla so that she could be with him for the next 3 or 4 months. And the year the paigam got in a little late, she used to grumble, कि मेरे भाई ने अभी तक मुझे invite नहीं किया. But he would unfailingly invite her. And he used to dress well, he used to eat well, he used to do massive exercises. So his entire thing was wealth, material gain, and longevity. So he was an interesting character. And my uncle, obviously, while he adored his Mamu, always felt that, there were two sides of him. But Mamu made a great impression on him. Like our ancestors of Raja Deennath from my maternal side, the Haksars also migrated to the plains from Kashmir. However, the historical material says that we came in from a place called Tanikpura in Tanikadal. The earliest Haksar thus traced was one called Mahesh around 1680. He lived at Kanikadal in Kanakpura, Srinagar. Mahesh Kumar had a son called Manohar. Manohar had a son called Rupram. Rupram had a son called Nandram. And he had two sons named Sahib Ram and Sitaram. Sitaram, in our family tree, it says 1680 Sitaram, and it says, and Sitaram lived in 1804 in Kashmir, and the family tree says in 1804, Sitaram leaves for Hindustan. I don't know why the word Hindustan comes. And I also felt that to a great period of that 100 years when Kashmiri Pandits were in the various states, they always felt very distinct. We are Kashmiri Pandits. The idea of India and that, I think I'm first a Kashmiri Pandit before I'm anything.
That's
Which today sorry?
That
today,
genetics, yeah.
Today, when I look back, I would say I'm an Indian who's also Kashmiri.
Yes, that's how it should be now. Yeah. Now it is the thing.
But I'm just saying that's how. He migrated to Gwalior, Sitaram, and Bishan Narayan was in Delhi in 1820. And Bishan Narayan is our ancestor who had 4 sons. And we come from Sarup Narayan family. And Sarup Narayan was the one who was P.N. Haksar's great-grandfather, and who settled in Bazar Sitaram. And Bazar Sitaram was an interesting place. In 1857, one of the Haksars and our place was plundered by the Britishers. And the Britishers gave, after all the Haksar, other Kashmiris went and complained bitterly to the Kashmiris. They gave a compensation, substantial compensation. With that compensation, a Haveli was built, and a large part of the money was kept in a trust of which a temple was made in Mathura. The temple of Sham Sundar,
Shamsu.
Krishna temple. So it was interesting that how Kashmiri Pandits, who are Shaivites, had a Kashmiri temple in Mathura, and which was an imposing Haveli and lots of land in Mathura, and all the widows used to stay there, and that was a place where a lot of time uh, the ancestors used to go from time to time on pilgrimage. Uh, Sitaram Bazar, the Haveli is also known as Sarup Narayan Haveli, which later on became the Haksar Ki Haveli. It was an imposing edifice built in the Indo-Saracenic architecture, beautiful, as all Havelis are, ornate, huge angan, beautiful pillars, and when Jawaharlal Nehru was getting married to Kamla Kaul, Kamla Kaul was actually a god given to the Kaul family. She was actually a Atal.
Haksar. They were Haksar, no?
And Atals also had a huge house there.
Okay.
But they felt that the Haksar Haveli was large enough for the bride ki bidai wahan se ho. So the marriage and the badai of Kamla Kaul took place from Haksar Ki Haveli. Just some anecdotal.
Yeah.
And Jawaharlal Nehru used to come when he visited Delhi, and I believe that he also used to stay there for whatever little I know about. Sarup Narayan has also great testimony about him. Very good natural abilities. Conduct was always unexceptional. His acquirements in English literature and science are very respectable considering the short time he's had been in college. Possesses an extensive knowledge of Persian, Urdu, and he has turned into good use in preparing several translations of scientific and historical work for the Vernacular Translation Society. He went to Indore as a teacher. He was invited to Delhi College, and but he very soon became a Moor Munshi in the office of Sir R.N.C. Hamilton, agent to the Governor General for Central India. And within 5 years, Sarup Narayan became Dewan of Bundelkhand, office of Central Indian Agency. On what kind of person was Sarup Narayan Haksar? On the evidence of many letters and reports written about him, he comes through as a meticulous and painstaking person with a high sense of duty, unmindful of personal convenience and comfort. He bore himself with dignity and pride in varying circumstances. When not absorbed in official work, Sarup Narayan devoted himself to scholarly pursuits. He left behind an unfinished translation of portions of Mahabharata into Persian, and also translate the entire Vishnu Purana into that language. So Sarup Narayan's son was Suraj Narayan, my grandfather, who was also Dewan of Bundelkhand, died very young. And there was, and my grandfather's brother was a person called Pandit Rajendra Narayan Haksar. And I want to talk a little about him because Pandit Rajendra Narayan Haksar had a great influence on both P.N. Haksar and me also, because I saw him as my grandfather. I saw him. He was very affectionate to me. He was my grandfather's younger brother. And I want to talk to you about some other Haksars who were part of the freedom struggle, etc. But I will quickly go into this Pandit R.N. Haksar, because uh, a little bit on my grandfather. He said my father was very fair, almost European in complexion. His black mustache accentuated his fairness. Standing at 6 feet, he seemed in my childhood memory like a giant. He could have been a gentle, comforting giant had he talked more to me, told me stories, made me sit on his lap, or walking hand in hand with me, or sometimes lifted me up and played with me. Uh, my grandfather, Jagdish Narayan Haksar, was a judge and traveled extensively in the CP and Barar, that belt, Nagpur, Katni, Madhya Pradesh, all of that area. Sensitive person, uh, a very bright judge. He had the power to hang people. And it's said that when he used to give these sentences, he used to be very desolate. He used to be very sad. He was a sensitive person. And he died just as he retired.
Oh,
Uh, and so it was Pandit Rajendra Narayan Haksar, his brother, and I want to just talk about him a little bit because uh, Pandit Rajendra Narayan Haksar is an interesting personal place because he wanted to uh, get a job but couldn't get a job. He was educated. He was BA LLB, MA LLB, and when asked, even the Britishers at that point of time were giving preferences to other communities. And there is some, where I've read somewhere that I've just got that. Just give me a second. It says that so this is a exchange where Sokat Bhai, one of the uh, cousins who was in Sheesh Mahal, lived in Sheesh Mahal. Our family was moving all around. And my uncle P.N. Haksar visits them because, in summers or in winters, uh, family occasions, people used to all travel and come together. That was another very good thing which people have lost now. Uh, you know, every occasion we went and met. And he says that, and I seem to have a problem with the light, but
doesn't
anyway,
matter. Doesn't matter. You can continue like this.
yeah. He said, I recall being surprised. He took my uncle to a place and he said, I have come here to escape from Sheesh Mahal. Now, Sheesh Mahal was an imposing Haveli. So I recall being surprised by his remark and asked him why he wished to escape from Sheesh Mahal, which I found fascinating and so full of memories. Full of memories, yes, it's a mausoleum built to entomb memories. Yadgaron ka makbara. You do not have to live there, but I do. And what are those memories about our ancestors? They cannot feed us. We have to do something ourselves. And those memories restrict our choices. I am a graduate, but I have no job. I want to marry, but I cannot without a job. Our earlier patrons, the Mughal, disappeared, and the British are no longer our patron. They are not interested in us, he said. They do not trust us. They trust the newly Western educated Muslims. They turn to Sikhs. Even among Hindus, they suspect the higher caste. Look at what happened to Inder Bhai, the Rajendra Narayan Haksar, my grandfather's younger brother. So this is very interesting that uh, Inder Bhai started a shop. Finally, uh, Inder Bhai, uh, with great hesitancy, uh, and he started practicing law, but he wasn't very happy about what was happening. 1921-22 was full of turbulence. Gandhi had emerged at the India scene. Uh, my grandfather's uncle Shiv Narayan was deeply involved in nationalist fervor, and So heavy was the weight of tradition and family pride that the idea of being in trade or commerce seemed inadmissible. Around 24, 25, when things settled down a bit and Shiv Narayan Haksar came out of jail, he began to work on Inder Bhai's inhibitions. And at some point of time, the family agreed that you could get into commerce. And was prepared psychologically to break from his Kashmiri Brahminical past. And in one corner, Chandni Chowk, under the shadow of Clock Tower on the Ghantagar Road, he started a shop called Pandit Brothers. And Pandit Brothers was an institution, later on became an institution. And then in 1927, two more shops in Connaught Place. And they became the largest wholesalers for Bombay dyeing. We had a direct relationship with Nasli Wadia's father. We were the biggest wholesalers. And Inder Bhai conducted business with a very different refinement, whether it was royalty, whether it's the Prime Minister's office, governor, president, social activist, musicians, artists. People came to Pandit Brothers to meet Panditji and also to buy linen for home, towel, bed sheets, this thing. It was an institution in Delhi. What Bombay store is to Bombay, Pandit Brothers was to Delhi. And there is this thing that how I accompanied Inder Bhai to the shop which faced the clock tower. It must have been about 15 yards away. Outside the shop, there was a board in which two words were painted, Pandit Brothers. The shop was on 2 floors and tailor was all attached to it. All kind of cloth was sold and the shop on the first floor was somewhat mysteriously called showroom. Inder Bhai presided over it, his slim, tall figure, clad immaculately in sherwani and churidar pajama. He would rise to greet each customer as he or she came. There would be an exchange of gracious words in chaste Urdu. Sometimes he would recite some Urdu poetry and inquire about the well-being of the family of each customer. After greeting customers, Inder Bhai would lead them gently in infinite grace, pass them on to a salesman who also spoke about the refined language of Delhi. Pandit Brothers stood out for their integrity. No haggling, bills have to be raised, no cash, great ethics. And there's so much that I can share about it. And he was also, but what happened was that it was unfortunate that Pandit Brothers as an institution was subjected to raids in the emergency.
Sanjay Gandhi's time?
Sanjay Gandhi was there. Mrs. Gandhi's time, I would say.
Mrs. Gandhi's time, but Sanjay Gandhi was the man behind it, they say. I don't know.
Okay. Yes, possible. So, yes.
Because he didn't like PM Haksar. Yeah.
The Morarji Desai government has set up a commission of inquiry under the chairmanship of retired Supreme Court Judge J.C. Shah to investigate the excesses of emergency. On 8 February 78, the case history of the raids of Pandit Brothers. Pandit Haksar, Rajendra Narayan Haksar, and my Phupa, Kanta Prasad Mushran, who was another luminary who retired as member Railway Board, who was also helping my grandfather, were both arrested and taken to jail. And P.N. Haksar was at that time the Deputy Chairman Planning Commission. And this was a very dark moment. The very next day, R.K. Garg, an eminent and widely respected lawyer, one-time CPI member and a close friend of Haksar, wrote to Justice Shah giving a chronology of all that happened in Pandit Brothers case since July 1975. It is my knowledge that Mr. P.N. Haksar was always of the view that Prime Minister's son must not sponsor or promote Maruti Limited, and the Prime
Yes.
Minister must make a choice between the son and the nation. How Sanjay Gandhi took it was his concern. P.N. Haksar tried to maintain high standard of integrity in every office of trust that he occupied. I know of no other reason that he could have invited the indignities and justice for the venerable old man, Mr. R.N. Haksar, who happens to be his uncle.
Yes, I have read about this incident. This is very, very, very pathetic incident, and
Yes,
even P.N. Haksar was very much disappointed. I mean, he went to the Prime Minister, but Prime Minister didn't reply to his this query. So this was a great shock for him, a great shocker. And there are other reasons also. I heard that during his studies abroad, Sanjay wanted to come back, but P.N. Haksar advised Indira Gandhi that unless and until he completes his degree, there's no purpose in coming back and starting Maruti. First of all, let him learn completely, earn some degree. So he
yes.
was he felt that he's a nagging man and he's advising my mother against me, something like that. Yeah,
So, so there were all kinds of things. I mean,
yeah,
and this is a long story, so I won't get into it.
yeah. That's a
But
different story
it's a different thing. But I'm just saying that
about your family, and yeah, you were talking about
yeah,
the
so
family tree.
that R.N. Haksar had to be subjected to this, and I will tell you another interesting incident which happened when I was there, and let me just try and see. Uh, so when my grandmother passed away,
Okay,
uh, this was 79, and Mrs. Gandhi decided to come home. PN was staying in Shantiniketan, and there is a an episode which is there which I want to narrate. I can't find it, but nevertheless, it's not so. Which says that she came in unannounced. I remember I was there at home,
okay,
and we were all in the drawing room. My bua was there, my mother, my aunt, and on those days desert cooler used to be there. And वो desert cooler में
that's good.
सारे लोग पीछे फिर सब सो रहे थे, डार्क बिल्कुल कर दिया था, सो रहे थे. And she, along with Usha Bhagat, a confidant, rings the bell. And somebody opens and she sees Mrs. Gandhi. And Mrs. Gandhi had come to condole the death of my grandmother. Now, my Bua Saraswati Mushran, whose husband was put in jail, and my aunt, who was subjected to such mental torture, were very cold towards her. So it was left to PNH to talk in a convivial fashion. I'm just trying to just say that in spite of everything, he never said a word against her. He kept it to himself. He didn't say, "Don't come here." He never said. He kept his whatever he felt he had to do.
Dignity and grace. Yeah.
Yeah, dignity. And I think that is also a huge quality.
That's
Today,
a
everybody
wonderful one.
speaks so ill about everybody and say things about so much happened, and he kept it to himself. And I think these are also qualities that how you speak, how you talk, what is loyalty. These are things that were ingrained in the Kashmiri Pandits. And what I'm saying is reflective of all the Pandits who were there.
That's true.
And so, there was one story about that when P.N. Haksar was received a telegram, and the Govindanarayan, the Union Home Secretary, one of the ICS officers generally fond of, wrote to him that the government has decided to offer him an award of Padma Vibhushan for the Republic Day of 1973. And PN replies to that, may I first of all say that the very thought that I should be given an award is by itself great reward for whatever service I might have rendered as a public servant. I am grateful for this and to the Prime Minister. However, I have a difficulty in accepting the award. All these years, I've often said to myself that one should work so that one can live with oneself without regret. This gives me a measure of inner tranquility and even courage. Accepting an award for work done somehow causes an inexplicable discomfort to me. I hope I will not be misunderstood. I repeat, I'm grateful for the thought that my services should be recognized. For me, this is enough. I would beg of you not to press me to accept the award itself. I should be grateful if you kindly convey to Prime Minister my deep and abiding gratitude for the privilege I had to serve under her. I think when Pandit R.N. Haksar passed away,
Yes.
no less than a person of Mr. Vajpayee wrote and condoled his passing away. And so this is a very interesting period, of our family where both I was very fortunate in many ways because I lived with him in my college days, in my work days, till I got married. I was petrified of him as a patriarch, but I was more closer to my aunt, who really loved me, and as kids we were allowed to sit. People used to come in and go out and observe, and there were many moments where you heard something or you saw somebody, and these are very interesting times.
Yeah.
During emergency itself, I remember I think we have run out of time now, so
No. It's all right. You can continue. Please.
so
There's no time limit as such.
yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think so. That's it. I think I have given a certain idea of the
It was.
how Pandits sort of the Kashmiriyat, and they kept to themselves.
Kashmiri identity. Yeah.
What absolutely
So that
purity.
was. Yeah. So what was wonderful.
Unfortunately,
Yeah.
Khalsa, Kashmiri Mohalla mein, there are 3 people who live there. Havelis have been sold off. Sheesh Mahal was destroyed. We sold it, and then it was given to somebody, and it's all fell down. The historical legacy is gone. So when you sort of realize that we've carried so far, and
That's what's very
now
important.
fading away. We are fading away. It gives me comfort, however, to see the new generation of Kashmiri Pandits who have come from the valley, who I know will carry the legacy and carry it forward. It gives me the burden that we have carried all this. I wouldn't say a burden. It was something that we had to do it. But I know that it's now,
Change.
it's not, we have few of us, not many. And we need this thing. I'll tell you one story about Kashmir.
Yes.
In 86, we went to Kashmir. My wife's chacha was General Handu. General
General
Handu
Handu,
was
sir.
the army commander, Northern Command. He was a
He
big
was
boss
a
over there.
very
Dynamic
strong
soldier.
general. Very strong general.
Strong, dynamic.
Pakistanis used to frightened from his
बिल्कुल
name.
बिल्कुल दिलेर थे बिल्कुल.
डरते
Like
थे
General
जनरल
Sundar,
हंडू. Yeah.
like General Sundar ji, he was a dileer. And Kashmiri Pandits throughout history have shown that valor. And so Brahmins but great courage,
Great.
and were great fighting men also, great soldiers also, which is a real rare quality. And I remember we were having he had an imposing house, and we were sort of that evening when we went for dinner, we was he was very disturbed because uh, there was shelling across the border, infiltrations happening, our soldiers were dying, and he was extremely disturbed at the turn of events, and he felt that his hand was being throttled, that we can probably go and give them a bit of a jolt, and he was very disturbed. Next day, we had to go to see a cricket match, 86. An army commander, the way he moves, he's a boss. And stadium, he has his own area. Governor is there, but army commander is army commander.
Yeah, he is. No doubt.
So we were all sitting and khana ho raha hai, sab kuch ho raha hai. And the course of the match, there were these slogans: Pakistan Zindabad, Pakistan Zindabad. That evening, my wife and I strolled down the Dal Lake, and we saw small kids with the little flags, Pakistani flags. And I distinctly remember telling my wife, I said, Archana, because 86, everything was fine. Nothing was happening. Nobody knew.
It deteriorated further from 86
It 90, yeah, 88, 90. But on that particular, everything was, no, we didn't know.
Undercurrent level. It was an undercurrent level, yeah.
I said that there is a problem brewing and something is going to erupt. And that's what happened. My wife's mommy is from the Ghasi family.
Okay.
And one of the Masis was a doctor, lady doctor. And she was a very brave person who stayed through this period. And she was helping everyone from Hindus to Muslim to injured, and till she had to be evacuated because she was also threatened. So those were dark days. And when I look back, the echo of those days were heard. Unfortunately, I don't think we did enough or we responded enough. And I must candidly admit that. But the echoes were there. But I think a lot more could have been done.
Yes, that's
true. With this, I sort of so there's a lot that we can talk about. A lot of people, a lot of this thing. There is a very interesting,
very sad and very pathetic aspect of contemporary Kashmir that our politicians could not hold. They could not. The benefits could not reach to the grassroots level, and things were manipulated, and that's why the rebellion, and that went into the religious. This fanaticism. People exploited, Pakistan exploited, and we could not hold it. Although our army was the best one, but our political system somewhere got compromised and leaked. That's how it is. But sir, it was a great deal of what you went through. It was a crisscross through the all shades in a very shorter span of time. The scope of this program, it was very delightful. We went into the eras, the people. Especially the Bishan Narayan Dar, the time, the conservatives, and the first person who went to England. You told the wonderful anecdotes, and then later on, it became an interlocutor. They became the most elegant, most regal race of Indian race, who were the problem solvers, who became the heads of the states. And your own family, these branches like Atal. I was there, and I had one program on this Pandit Shambhunath Pandit, the first judge of India. I had been to Calcutta. Whenever I go to Calcutta, I used to research and go to his place. There are around 6 bungalows, old bungalows now ruined. He had 2 wives. One was Kashmiri wife. She was. They went. Her descendants went to Lucknow, and then Bengali wife. So I could not find anyone. I brought the Bengali wife's descendant, 5th generation descendant. He was on the program, and the road I have seen, it is on his name. The hospital, Shambhunath Pandit Hospital, wonderful hospital, and a philanthropist class character, as you said. I think you people, when this your generation, your elders had been able to inculcate that sense level of character, that integrity into everybody, that all of a majority of Kashmiris who moved out of the plains, it is all because of their upbringing, and of
So
course
I'm in a
genetic
meeting.
brilliance is
I'm
there.
going
All right,
They
Akshay, I'll
went
talk
on
to
to
you later.
such a wonderful level, and they rose to the positions of prominence, and they were very. You see, talk about the PN Haksar. I don't think there is a very real personality like PN Haksar, who appeared and hovered into the landscape of post-independent India. A man so well read in Sanskrit and so well read in socialism. A man without any interest, without any flawless character. I mean, not an iota of corruption. A man who was great nationalist. So that was from your dynasty. That was from the people who went there. It was your upbringing. Something was great about it. I am reading the comments. Your friend Ashok Ogra Saab has greeted you well, and he has added many comments here there, and he has said he's very happy. He is adding on to your conversation. And then we have Professor Thrissell. He's a very wonderful personality. He has also read about Professor. What about R.B. Iqbal Narayan Gurtu, Vice Chancellor of
yes,
BHU? So
yes,
there
yes.
are, and there is
So many of these people who are educationalists of eminence. You're right, absolutely.
educational.
I have not mentioned of so
And
many of
no, I
these
mean, it
people.
cannot be done. And there's a beautiful couplet from Brij Narayan Chakbast. Zarra zarra hai
Chakwas.
mera Kashmir ka mehman nawaz. राह में पत्थर के टुकड़ों ने दिया पानी मुझे. It is Brij Narayan Chakbast. So such is the wonderful lining. And there are a lot many people. Prana Trisal has also talked about Kunjurus, Rajnath
Kunjurus,
Kunjuru, Adarnath
Rajnath
Kunjurus.
Kunjuru,
Ogra
Kajus,
Sahib is all along
Kunjurus.
with us, and he's talked about, he's almost seconding your narrative. And Pandit Bakar Shop, they're all talking about the 1975, what you explained to them. And Kuldeep Bhatt Saab is there, and Pranath Kuldeep Bhatt. And there are a lot many people who are writing. There will be people who will be reading it, after, I mean, watching this program later, because this program will be recorded on the, I mean, it will be available on the YouTube and other things. But sir, it was a great, wonderful experience. I wanted to ask you questions, but there is no question left as such. We want to bring one subject, one particular conversation of Shitanath conversation on PN Haksar. We'll see in near future if we are able to cater to one personality, any personality who can detailedly talk about his acumen as a strategist, as an advisor, as a diplomat, as an ambassador, and as his personality's inner traits as well. So we plan to have one particular program on that. So, sir,
Also,
first
I
of
have
all, I would like to at
also
the end, yeah, yeah, please.
I have also didn't we did not have time to mention about Ajit Narayan Haksar, who
Ajit
was
Narayan
the
Haksar.
first Indian chairman of ITC,
Oh,
and uh, Cow Saab, R and Cow,
Are Aaron Cow
very
is he's
close
the
friend. They were thick. Cow Saab and Haksar Saab were the real people who kept everything together. Believe me.
it is Cow Saab who managed the Second
And
World War,
so,
Bangladesh War. Bangladesh
yeah.
War was his, on his base. He created the
So,
cadre and everything in
so
Bangladesh. Brilliant man.
I have not even touched upon them, and they were people who were very close. I have seen, I have
Yes.
interacted. Their families are still very close to me.
Yeah.
We are in touch. Uh, they were good days, and we've
Yeah.
done our best.
You did your best, and we are all proud of you. And all now the younger generation, the migrate post 90 migration, younger generation, they have all gone to across the globe, and they have risen to very higher positions of eminence. So Kashmiris, they have all their sheen is glittering all across the globe, all across the planet.
I think,
I would
and
like to have one. Yeah, please, Deepak
so
sir.
go ahead, go
What's
ahead,
up,
go ahead.
Boliye? Huh?
I,
I want to
so
ask
I,
one question. That is a personal question about you. I didn't ask you about your, because you have been taught in this what do you call it, Sindhya school, and then you were brought up in Delhi University, and then you did your what is known as GMP
Cornell,
at
yes,
huh? GMP
Cornell University, yes,
at Cornell
Cornell.
University. Cornell University. Tell us some anecdotes, a bit of anecdotes about your interaction with your father and mother, and then the siblings. A bit of it about the
So my,
school. About
uh,
yeah,
I'll very quickly do it. But I think we're running out of time, but I
yeah.
think uh, so. P.N. Haksar had a sister called Saraswati Mushran,
Saraswati Bushran. Yeah.
who was 5 years elder to him. Saraswati Mushran was a great cook, and she wrote a book on Kashmiri cuisine. And she was really the
You see.
person who brought the community together, लोगों की शादियां कराना, लोगों के arrangements करना, अपने घर में खाना बनाना, and all that stuff. My father was 15 years younger to my uncle and 20 years younger to his sister. And therefore, when his father died, he was very young. And therefore, he always looked to PNH as a patriarch, and he was actually scared of even speaking in front of him. I was more sort of. PN Haksar has 2 daughters, and I'm the only child of my parents. And my father used to live in Sitaram Bazar, Chitli Kabar, etc., and did his engineering from Delhi College of Engineering.
Oh, really?
And he was the first generation Indian engineer who went to Sheffield to learn the art of steel making, and then went to Durgapur Steel Plant, and he was an expert in refractories, which is really the heart of steel making, blast furnace, and lived till his retirement over there. An exceptionally intelligent, spiritual person, honest, and completely didn't know how to. He was his work, his books, and his spiritualism, and that's it. It's completely different from PNH. PNH had a remarkable life at a different level altogether. He was, in that way, cocooned in a great singer. My father was a great singer. He classical singer, had done his training under Dagar brothers, and there was a time when he had to take a decision whether to pursue singing or he should go into engineering. I decided to do engineering. And talking about classical singing, one of my brother-in-laws is Pandit Kichlu,
Yeah.
Calcutta में based है, who was the founder director of Sangeet Research Academy. Himself a classical singer of eminence who really brought in the Guru Shishya Parampara, and people like Ajay Chakravarti, great singer, Rashid Khan, and all these people have him in great admiration. And he's just released a book on his life. He was also in corporate world, but he left the corporate world and to pursue singing. So I was packed off. To cut a long story short, I was felt that as a boy, I need to couldn't stay at home. I had to be I had to lead a hard life, and I had to sort of be sent to a boarding school. And when it came to boarding school, a lot of my nephews at that point of time were in Doon school, and Ajit Nair Haksar himself is a Doon school. His son was from Doon school. My nephew was in Doon school. The Atals, the entire Atal family, my sister's family, my nephews, were all from Doon school. But when it came to my uncle was very clear that he should go to Gwalior, because Gwalior was very much one in terms of Haksars have contributed greatly to Gwalior in every person. They were there, Sir Kailash Narayan, Iqbal Narayan, they were all this thing. So there was a very strong branch of our family in this thing. But secondly, Scindia has great traditions and great moral values, rooted to the soil, very Indian in nature. And that was, he felt, and Spartan, and he felt that was the right place for me to go. And so I went there, and I think there was a time when the choice was to pursue higher education or to all Haksars were they were in foreign service at that point in time. P.N. Haksar was in foreign service. Anand Narayan Haksar was A.N.D. Haksar, who's a great Sanskrit scholar, ambassador. My father's uncle, S.N. Haksar, was ambassador. So obviously, people felt that that could be one option, getting into government. But by chance, I think that's the time when the Moria, ITC Moria had come. It was one of the big hotels after the Asia,
Yeah, joint
before the Asia. And what I thought would be a summer job became a passion of a lifetime. And I was very fortunate to have joined a company like ITC. I met Ajit Nayan Haksar, and he said, "Very young boys like you, we need them to come and be part of the hoteliering in the hospitality industry."
Okay.
And I didn't know that I would be placed at the reception of the hotel. So I went to the lowest rung, and it is from there
You became the
that I would.
CEO.
I just think so. God has been very kind. I don't take credit. I would say that I was very fortunate. Not everybody would have been able to make it. And when I look back, I always tell that uh, I'm in the board of Springdale's school education society. Mrs.
Yeah.
Kumar who was the founder, a 96-year-old founder, British lady, whose husband was contemporary of P.N. Haksar in the foreign service. When I went for her birthday celebration, I think her 90th birthday, and she knows me, and since I'm on a board, I interact with her. So she called me and hugged me, and she said, "Deepak, we're very proud of you." And I said, "But I haven't done anything exceptional or brilliant, uh, except that I can say with a great degree of confidence that I was honest and high integrity." And I said, "It was there that I compete with my elders. But in terms of brilliance and memory, I don't think I have that." They were very sharp. I mean, to recite poems, to Sanskrit, give speech, they were different metal altogether. But in terms of integrity, I thought that I would measure up to them. And she said, "That's what we make." And she said, "That's absolutely right." And she said, "We are so proud of you." So that gives me some comfort that I did something right. And
But you did a lot many things in industry. The peat industry is very proud of you and your innovations and sustainable model and environmental
I was very
friendly and other
fortunate
things. That's a
to
great,
have.
great. Yeah, there are no
I was very
parallels to
fortunate.
your work. You are a leader, a corporate leader of a very distinguished mind and vision. Yeah. Yes, sir.
I was very fortunate to have mentors like Mr. Deveshwar, who was the chairman of ITC and great visionary, and and Mr. Habib Rahman, who was one of the directors of ITC. Both played a formidable role in my career. And I must also add over here that when I was uh, in many ways, uh, many people have helped me in different phases of life. I would like to. I remember Mrs. Call, B.V. Call. Mrs. Call, Mr. Call was a philosophy teacher in Ranjas. They used to take care of Mr. Vajpayee, and they were a wonderful couple, and they looked after him so that he could
Yeah.
devote him time into politics. And B.V. Call was an amazing, warm, wonderful soul. And she was a Haksar from Gwalior.
Oh,
Her maiden surname was Haksar. I knew her very well. And I remember in my college days, she was played a very important role in guiding me. In fact, I used to go and visit her, and when Mr. Vajpayee was incarcerated at Ferosha Road. And one day, my uncle called me and said that your name has come, the report of the police. And he said that do you know that these are difficult times and we could be raided and your aunt could go to jail.
Oh,
And he stopped over there. He didn't say that you should stop going or you should not do this, because that was not his style. He had inculcated and educated us to make our choices and make our decision. But he felt that I needed to know that I could also get into jail, for just going and meeting them, etc. So I think she played a very, she was a source of, I must confess that, and there were so
they
many
were
others.
they
Uh,
were in the same institution in Gwalior. Vajpayee ji and Mrs. Kaul. They were the students also.
I, they were students altogether, yes, they were.
They
And
were
Mr.
they
Golli,
were
he was also, yeah. And then people who came in and played a very, uh, Jaswant Singh ji, very close. When I was in Jodhpur, I was the general manager and I was having a lot of problems because it's a feudal system, and while the Rajputs may have differences between them, when it came to somebody else who wanted to get the affection of His Highness of Jodhpur, uh, they would sort of box him. And Siri, as a general manager, had to go leave that place in disgrace. And I had reached a point where I was a little unhappy. And I told my uncle that I went and met him and I said that, I'm having a very tough time over there. And he said, you should meet Jaswant Singh ji. They were very close to each other. Jaswant Singh ji used to look up to him. Jaswant Singh ji, Mr. Wadhwani, Mr. Vajpayee. Mr. Vajpayee used to come home. But they used to come and listen to him when he used to give some public lectures. It's quite incredible. So, he was bipartisan in that sense, not considered to be, they were there. And so Mr. Jaswant Singh ji helped me a lot and smoothened my relationship with His Highness, who then became my great benefactor. And that period led me to move into, because it was a very successful period. And later on, I was in touch with Jaswant Singh ji right through when he was the foreign minister. He used to call me up. He says, he met Mr. Talbot, the Deputy Secretary of State, quietly up in the Towers Club. And a lot of path-breaking things. It was a wonderful team, Mr. Jaswant Singh ji and the principal secretary at that point in time was also a very wonderful person. So there were a lot of people who helped. They came in my way, gave their hand, gave their blessings, and they became instruments.
It's all His grace, Master's grace, that these people come and they become the instruments. It is all destined, rather, we can say. It is all His grace.
So my interest in 2000, when I was in Mumbai, my family had to stay back because my uncle passed away. He died of cancer, and my father and they died of 20 days apart. So it was a very difficult moment. Suddenly the patriarch of the family passed away. My father had a stroke and he was suffering. And my wife had stayed back with my mother and my young daughter, because Pandit Brothers was a losing proposition. It had litigations, it had debts, it had many mouths to feed. It was complete disarray, because it's a long story. So my sisters took the decision that she would handle that place along with the other Saraswati Mishran's son, Vinu Mishran, who's now about 80 years old himself. And then they managed Pandit Brothers. So I went to Mumbai. And in Mumbai was a transformation for me in many ways. With ITC's largest investment, about 450 crores. We opened that new hotel. But that was also a period of a transformation for me, because I went to a place called Ganeshpuri. and Guru Mai Swami Chitulasananda, disciple of Baba Muktananda. And Ganesh Puri's entire philosophy is based on Kashmir Shaivism. And Baba Muktananda brought Kashmir Shaivism into absolute translation of books, everything. And when I started reading and getting to understand that, it became a fascinating journey for me. 5 years was a fascinating journey of corporate work and spiritual growth. Got Shaktipat of a guru. And when I came back to Delhi after many years, I realized that while Kashmir Shaivism was very much ingrained and I had gained immensely from it, I just felt that I needed to go through Vedanta. I needed to go through Upanishads.
You mentioned that you are a Vedanta basically.
I needed to go through Gita, because Kashmir Shaivism does not take the source of these Vedanta, or they come from the 64 Agamas. And it's a different stream. The both are non-dual. Advaita Vedanta and Kashmir Shaivism are both non-dual. One takes inspiration from Shankara, and the other, the Trika Shaivism as we call, takes inspiration from the great master called Abhinav Gupta. And Abhinav Gupta is a giant of a person. When you compare Abhinav Gupta, there is no person
polymath to his comparison.
You cannot compare, because he went much beyond writing
Tantraloka,
Malini Vijay Tantra,
Abhinav Gupta, Abhinav Bharti.
Yes,
commentary on the dramaturgy.
But also he wrote on aesthetics, on drama, on music.
Drama. I mean, he
was so the whole thing. So I realized that I needed to do Advaita Vedanta and study that. And I felt that if I did it, I would have a better appreciation of Kashmir Shaivism, which is, and that what sort of helped me to have a better appreciation of this thing. But Kashmir Shaivism is, and I think another thing that I think that we probably missed out, that while we did our rituals, I think the philosophy of Kashmir Shaivism was missing, at least. And I've been going to Kashmir very frequently over the last many years. And it so happened that every time I used to go to Ishwara Ashram.
Lakshmanju.
Lakshmanju Sahib.
Met Lakshmanju?
No, I never met Lakshmanju. But every time I went, there was nobody in that ashram, one caretaker who opened the door to his bedroom, and I used to go and meditate there. I was so fortunate.
Beautiful, that chinar tree, under that chinar tree.
So yes, so Swami Lakshmanju has been, is now
I had two subjects on Kashmir Shaivism. I had two conversations on Kashmir Shaivism. One was Mir Zafar Saab. He had come, and now I'm also inviting Bettina Sharda also. I mean, she's one of the followers of Kashmir.
Bettina Sharda is very, very good. Bettina Sharda is very good, and so is Mark
Dawski. He is the.
He's the
who cannot. He is very widespread.
I'm currently learning Kashmir Shaivism under Pandit Motilal Pandit.
That's great.
Who is also a good Buddhist scholar, but also a very good Kashmiri scholar. And he is at a ripe old age of 80, has taken the trouble to give us a lecture every week. And he is doing a lot of translations, a lot of work, doing everything he can to preserve the Kaula Parampara, the Trikash traditions alive. So I'm very fortunate to be studying under him. And so
that's so great, sir.
Thank you.
We are heading for this closing of the time, and it was a great delight. I never wanted to end this conversation, because it is not a conversation. It is about the civilization of 300 years and development and personalities and discipline. and making of personalities and rising to eminence and giving to the society, being the nationalist. It is a wonderful, it was a wonder, as you said, it's a mosaic, a wonderful mosaic, a hue. And it is very difficult to explicitly, I mean, do it in a very small time frame or a scope within a very limited scope of time. But then again, you did it very wonderfully. I mean, it was a master stroke way you spoke, and you we have touched the finer nuances of this entire journey. And somewhere down the line, this is a very, very enchanting. It was your magnanimity that you came, despite of our long conversations on telephone, but finally you came, and it was a wonderful, wonderful experience. I think everybody enjoyed it, and many of the people who will just watch this video on the YouTube later, and certainly they will. It will be a great delight for all of them. It is so great. I'm so grateful to you for your coming and visiting Shitalnath Conversation in our historic 56th conversation show. Thank you very much. Pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you, Kalsa. Thank you
Thanks,
so
boss.
much.
Good luck and best wishes. All the best.
Thank you so
Thanks.
much, and best wishes to you also for continuing with this great work, bringing
Any
people.
message you want to give to the diaspora, our diaspora, especially the youngsters?
I think bring the same passion, the same commitment, the same moral values, the same inner discipline, with the added advantage of the language and the traditions of the Trikashaivism, the philosophy of Trikashaivism. It's a secular, it is all-encompassing,
It's beyond religion. Beyond religion.
beyond
Above
religion.
religion.
With that, move forward. You will be so much at peace with yourself, and keep the flag
Golden
flying high.
words. Those are the
We are-
golden
we are-
words you must understand.
We are very unique, and one must not lose sight of that. We have to carry this forward, and it can be in any corner of this world.
Yes.
It doesn't. We don't have to feel. Certainly you will feel. When I go to Kashmir, I reflect often. The air, the matti, the water. ये देखो, हमारे बुजुर्ग यहाँ रहते थे, but they left.
They left because
So let's keep that in our heart.
there's an
But
element.
wherever you go, make your mark. Make your
Yes.
mark. Stand out by your thoughts, by your language.
Thanks a lot, sir. Thanks a lot. It was a great blessing and great closing for your message for our diaspora. Thank you very much. I wish you all the best. Good luck. Thanks a lot. So that was this Deepak Haksar Saab, the corporate leader of the country, one of the most revered and respected, innovative, former CEO of the ITC hotels, and one of the most respected and rewarded and awarded corporate leader of the country. You could see his personality, his physical stature, his expression. It is all that we have in common in genetic, and that's what he said in his last message, that we must not forget about that we have a language and we have a Kashmir Shaivism. That is something, the greatest thing, greatest weapon which we have, which we can inculcate wherever we are in the world, and repeat what our elders do. And we came to know about lot many things about the journey of Kashmiris who went in the 18th century, how they preserved their identity. Today we may say that they don't have the language. I mean, people just 10 years back down the line, when they travel to Jammu, they forget their language. These people, under 300 years, they have maintained their identity, they have maintained their culture, they have inculcated discipline to their children. That's why the entire brass in the 19th century and closing of the 18th century, they became one of the most elitist and respected. They became the interlocutors. They became the sagacist people who were always revered and respected everywhere, and they were indispensable because of their discipline, character, and genetic brilliance in all the aspects. So I think this should be a very great eye opener, and people who think pessimistically about this community, these things should definitely inspire them. Rather trying to be critical, we should try to amalgamate and analyze and understand that there are many good things left in our identity, and we can go on and work for the betterment of country, betterment of nation, betterment of place Kashmir, betterment of humanity. So that's what is the wondrous about this race, this great race, who has produced so many prime ministers, so many kingdom heads, so many generals. Not today, from time immemorially, they have produced these great literateurs, great spiritual scientists, great meditators, great diplomats, and whatnot. So I think you must have all enjoyed this session as I enjoyed it today. It was a great pleasure to have him on our show, and I would like to say that one couplet of Cafe Azmi, अपने जंगल से घबरा के उड़े थे प्यासे, अपने जंगल से घबरा के उड़े थे प्यासे, हर शराब उनको समंदर आया होगा, हर शराब उनको समंदर नजर आया होगा, अपने जंगल से घबरा के उड़े थे प्यासे, हर शराब उनको समंदर नजर आया होगा. So that is the greatness of the human existence, human mobility, the human essence, the human strength. With that, I would like to close today's session, and very soon I'm going to have a session with a very uh, popular and very brilliant personality from Kashmir, a brilliant singer from Kashmir, melody queen from Kashmir, and I think you all will be waiting to watch who she is. It will be in the advertisement within few days. Thanks a lot. Have a wonderful, times, and I wish you all the best and good luck.